Thanks to those joining me live and to those that'll be joining me on Archive D Style here. If you listen to Archive, leave a comment, tell me what you think. Take a moment, thumbs up the video. Hit that notification button. That way you're notified every time D Style comes on live. That's that little bell button. Make sure you hit that. It will let you know that you will be notified. Right? That way you're not partially notified. That way you're always notified. Anyway, if you're listening live, you could look at the clock. Even on Archive, you could look at the time this was uploaded, and you'll notice this is a wrestling time. This is Monday Night Raw time, and here I am doing a wrestling video about the origins of wrestling instead. That's because, unfortunately, I find the current WWE product unwatchable, right? Maybe I'll get back to watching. Maybe I'll get back to doing some recaps about it, but not right now. I just can't watch it. I just can't do it. I just can't stand it. Can't do it, folks. But here I am. Let's talk some professional wrestling. Some professional wrestling history. All right. Let's go ahead and do that. Let me get some stuff here. So we're going to be talking today about the origins of pro wrestling. And some, not a lot, but some connection that it has to boxing in terms of it's quite a significant aspect of it, but it's not going to be the majority of what we're going to talk about right now, right? When it comes to wrestling, the origins of it, I mean, not talking from there's origins all the way to the 1800s. Now, I'm not going to sit here and give you names and that you can find on Wikipedia and all that. Okay, I want to kind of give you something that I think you can't really find there. You know what I mean? So, and kind of understand not only pro wrestling itself and its origins, but the influence that it's had on modern society. Because it has had some influences on modern society. Pretty huge aspects of it. Okay, you see it. I see it all the time. You know, even non-wrestling fans don't even realize it. All right, so let's look at a couple things here. First of all, how did it start? How did it, like, you watch professional wrestling today? You ask, how did this thing start? Like how did it start? Why did it end up where it ended up? And like what's going on, right? How did this whole enchilada thing happen? How did pro wrestling get to where it is? Meaning the whole kayfabe thing. So you can't really put a date on it. I know you'll probably go to some website somewhere and they'll tell you, oh, professional wrestling as we know it today started in 1915. Well, they don't really know that, okay? And it's anyone who claims to know the year it started is bullshitting because it's just not that clear, right? You need to first of all, for a moment, just think about the following: there was no internet. Well, duh, right? There wasn't even a telephone. And when there was, not everybody had a telephone. There were telegraphs. Telegraphs were around, right? These styles still use old school terms like telegraph when he talks boxing, by the way. Habit. That's how old boxing is. Okay? Boxing's so old, people say that, oh, he telegraphed the punches. We just kind of generation after generation just kept saying it. You know, it's people. I don't even think people, like half of the people that say telegraph the punches don't even know what a telegraph is, but they know what it means in boxing. But anyway, I can't give you a date. I can't. It's impossible. All right. It's. I'm sure there's historians that say, why, and in the mid 1800s, and I'm seeing all these mixed. There's a reason there's all this mixed information because no one knows. Like no one truly knows when kayfabe started. Right? Well, we know Greco-Roman wrestling and when that we have an idea when that started. We have an idea when catch wrestling started and all that. You can't have professional wrestling without those, right? We have an idea. But as far as when did someone say, what do you mean, D style? The when did somebody go, Like how did professional wrestling get to where it is? So you have to kind of think about it. Someone's realized at one point, we could make money, more money, if we do X. Right? So let me give you an example. Right? Everything is about being marketable. So if you had, for example, okay, and there is ugly origins in wrestling, right? It's not pretty, some of it. Like this racist origins is like there really is. If you look at wrestling, like let's say for example, if this is an if, right? If let's say, well, it's not really an if actually. Let me take that back. Let's say, for example, there was an ugly motherfucker that just didn't look very appealing, and but he was like a legit wrestler. Like, this dude was like a legit shoot wrestler. Okay, the term shoot means real, right? So there was a time where they did old school like shoot wrestling, where it was like modern day UFC minus like the kicks and certain things like Muay Thai but for the most part it was like legit and like old school shoot wrestling. Like you would like a promoter would have an old shoot wrestler, right? Now he could do A or he could do B. He could promote the shoot wrestler and he could beat people up and sure you'll have some people be mesmerized by it maybe, and you'll make a certain amount of money. Like he'll make money out of it, right? Ah, man, this guy's a shit. And then eventually someone's going to come around and beat him, and then that's the end of the road. You could do that. You could go the legit route, right? Nothing wrong with that. Or you can go around city by city, right? And let's just make a name up for this dude. I don't know, Mr. Steele. I don't know, whatever. Okay. You get Mr. Steele and you go town to town to town, right? And Mr. Steele is legit. And there's already rumblings about the whole thing being fake and it's shit. Even boxers were challenged to fights all the time, and it's but as far as the wrestlers, like it's like okay, so they went town to town, and what they would do is the following: they would say, "Who wants to go at it with the champ, right? Or Mr. Steele, all right? Who wants to go at it with Mr. Steele?" Okay, they'll go to a town to be like, "I want the toughest dude in this town," and if he could last 10 minutes with Mr. Steele, he will win $5,000. That's it. That's all he has to do. He needs to last 10 minutes, right? So now this is a legit shoot dude, right? So we get in there, the Mr. Steele would fuck dude up. Like he would beat the shit out of this dude, right? And it was legal. It was legal because they would go to carnivals. It was very clear that what the challenge was. Okay, they would have him sign a waiver, and then he would get his ass beat. And everybody would witness this in the town. They'll be like, holy shit, this dude just fucked up like one of the toughest dude in our town. He just fucked this dude up. And then, the following weekend, Mr. Steele is going to be wrestling some other dude, some blonde-haired dude, okay, that you would not believe is a fighter, all right? You'd be like, well, Mr. Steele's gonna fuck that dude up, and then you would witness this, you know, other dude who's not a shoot fighter, right? But it was kayfabe. They would have him beat Mr. Steele in front of everybody, and people would witness this. Oh my god! Let's just make up a name for the blonde hair dude. I don't know, Mr. Gold. Okay. Now, in reality, Mr. Gold couldn't fight or wrestle or do any of that, like, and shoot for real. Like, he couldn't. But the promoter and Mr. Steele and everybody else involved in this understood that this was business, understood the amount of money that's going to be made. Mr. Steele is going to make more money doing that, put more money in his pocket than just being involved in legitimate fights. All right? In legitimate, well, let me take that back. It's wrestling never used the term fight. It used the term match. Okay, that's number one. They kind of got away from that. I'm even doing it now, but doesn't matter, right? Fight was a term reserved for boxing, right? Match was for wrestling. So it was they knew they could make more money that way. And people would be like, oh my God, we just saw Mr. Steele, like, fuck dude up. Like, we know he's for real. Like, what? Mr. Gold beat him? What? And if anybody said to Mr. Steele, man, you let that dude beat you? That dude looked weak. What do you mean he beat you? Yeah, he beat you. Like, yeah, he beat me. Mr. Steele would just, this would give him the power to say, well, I could fuck you up. What do you think Mr. Gold would do to you? If he beat me, what do you think he would do to you? This was an early tactic used a lot, right? And as wrestling kind of, that's the origins of it. The carnival, when somebody says, wrestling is the fucking carnival sport, it's a carnival thing. It is, right? They would just go around town. Okay, sometimes it was the champion. Sometimes it was the dude that they were setting up to lose, all right, to the guy that they wanted to market. But they would go town to town, and they would have these wrestlers, beat the shit out of ordinary people. Like, you sign a waiver, and then bam, beat the shit out of you. That's how it started. Like, think of like WWE back in the Attitude Era when they had Ken Shamrock, right? If this was like the 1950s, it was like the early 1900s, all right? Ken Shamrock's the dude they would use to fuck dudes town to town, okay? And then he's going to put The Rock over on the weekend, and they're going to be like, holy shit, this dude just beat this guy that we know is for real because he was beating the shit out of townspeople. Like, they know it. Every promotion, all right? Every single promotion, okay, every promoter, they needed to have a legit wrestler. Like, it was a necessity. It was necessary. And you needed it for different reasons. You needed it to, beat up random dudes, okay, to just let everybody know, okay, this shit's quote unquote real, all right? And you needed it in case somebody didn't want to play ball, right? When the day comes, okay, we did all this promoting, quote unquote, right? We invested all this time on Mr. Gold. It's time for him to put somebody else over. Now, I think so-and-so is going to be more marketable, so it's now time for Mr. Gold to put him over. And then Mr. Gold just said, nah, I don't want to put that guy over. I don't want to put Mr. Silver over. I still want to be champ. I don't want to lose, right? It happened. And at that point, shoots would still happen, right? Like, I don't care what date somebody gives you. They're like, professional wrestling, it became kayfabe around 1915, right? Or whatever. It's kind of true. But the reality is, in the eyes of the commission, who was also in on it, ironically, but it could still be real. There could still be a shoot at any moment. Okay, now when I say shoot, like in today's wrestling, people say the term shoot for like, oh no, this is behind the scenes, like real stuff, right? Like, it's not part of the storyline. That's what they mean by shoot. Back in the day, shoot meant a real fight, okay, a real wrestling match. That's what shoot meant back in those days. There could be a shoot at any point, like all the way up to like the 50s, even 60s, right? There was like, it's just the truth, right? If you can visualize this, right? Let's say Mr. Gold doesn't want to put over Mr. Silver, right? Hold on, let me turn off this phone. Let's say that Mr. Gold doesn't want to put over Mr. Silver, okay? Then they could put Mr. Steel. Yes, I'm just making up names here, guys. All right. They could put Mr. Steel in there to just beat the shit out of Mr. Gold at any point. Like, you had to play ball. Like, it's, and you needed a quote unquote enforcer that understood what we need to do what we need to do here. The enforcer was the real shoot fighter. Sometimes he was a champion. Sometimes he would put somebody quote unquote over, meaning he would let him win, right? So, because if it made business sense, if dude was more marketable, all right, whatever the case is. But if need be, they could do a real shoot, and there's nothing the other wrestler could do about it. You have to play ball here, right? It was a necessary thing. One of the most fascinating stories I've heard was the Buddy Rogers Bruno Sammartino story, and I mean, we're talking. I mean, here we're talking 50s, 60s here, or like we're not talking early 1900s, 1800s. Buddy Rogers didn't want to put Bruno Sammartino over, so the promoter lied to Buddy Rogers and told him that, oh no, Bruno's going to put you over. And then Bruno, and in the ring, told him, I'm going to take your fucking belt. This is going to be a shoot. This is going to be a shoot here. This is not none of that, I'm just going to lay down for you bullshit. We're going to actually fight, buddy. We're going to actually have a real match. Buddy got scared, but Buddy gave up right away. It is what he didn't want, a real fight. So it's interesting. But anyway, let's go back a little more. All right. Let's go back a little more. Wrestling started, going carnival to carnival. In terms of boxing, all right? In terms of boxing, once the London Prize rules and the Marquess of Queensberry were kind of established, because in the early origins of boxing, there was a lot of grappling involved, right? People didn't want to see grappling. And I'm not talking clinches and fighting on the inside. That's not what I'm talking about. Okay. I'm talking literal, like, wrestling. Okay. Taking dudes down and fighting in the ground. And it's just, for whatever reason, it wasn't marketable in those days. And try to visualize yourself as a spectator in an arena. There was no TVs back then, no HD back then, right? And you just see two dudes rolling around in a corner of a ring. It's probably not that exciting to watch, right? So those things were kind of removed by promoters. Okay, that was one of the first aspects removed in terms of prize fighting, right? And prize fighting evolved to what we have now at some point. A lot of the dudes that were skilled in the craft of grappling, who were basically, their greatest weapon was, removed from them. Imagine being a prize fighter and you're one of the grapplers, and then they take that away from you. You have two choices. You can either go the pro wrestling route, or you can go the boxing route, where now you can't grapple anymore. Okay, and you're gonna get knocked the fuck out. All right, well, what are you gonna do? Now those days, a lot of boxers actually knew how to grapple. All right, it's they did, but it's not hard to tell people to understand why wrestling became fake. Right? It's not hard to tell. It evolved into that so they can make it more exciting, more theatrical. To give people a show, that's where they come up with the whole bouncing off the ropes and clotheslines and you know body slams, because there's more of a visual effect to that than an actual legitimate wrestling match where they're just rolling around on the ground, right? Or that's what it looks like. Okay, I know there's a lot of skill involved in actual grappling, but I'm talking about how it looks like to a spectator sitting up in the stands, right? It's a different kind of visualization. Whereas the theatrical nature of it, right, and the if they're not moving for like 10 minutes, it becomes very boring, right? When they're wrestling for position. Whereas you can be more theatrical about it and put on more of a quote unquote show. So they had to find a balance between how can we be theatrical, exciting, put on a show, but at the same time convince people that this shit is real. Because that was the balance they had to find. Any trained eye, right, that watched it probably knew that this shit's not real, right? But your average Joe that back in those days, okay, didn't quite know. It's not like everybody's been in a fight and stuff like that, right? So it's you looked at it, and that was the balance. So they would do little gimmicks, okay, to kind of show people that it's quote unquote real by like the example I gave you. They'll go town to town and have oh, you think it's fake? Okay, so whoever wants to fight the champ right now, or whoever they had up there, the real shoot fighter, right? And they would say, hey, whoever could beat him up, if you could last 10 minutes, I'll give you $5,000. The shoot fighter will beat the shit out of the guy that signs the waiver, right? And it worked. People would be like, man, I guess this shit is real. Like, holy shit, I think it's real, right? Like and it worked. Especially in those days, man. Like television was very limited, and the spectators that watched, it became a word of mouth, right? It's just word of mouth spread out. And yes, and you had the newspapers, that will look at this and suspect that it's not real, but like, what can you do? Like, it's the whole point was, and since those days, right? The one reason, so many people, anytime you tell someone you watch wrestling, or the reason they come, like they feel compelled to tell you that it's fake. Like, no one does that with anything else, right? Like, nobody does that when you watch a movie, right? And like, nobody tells you, hey, those Avengers aren't real, right? Like you don't watch Game of Thrones, and then people say, yeah, that shit's not real. That world's not even real. Like, that's not the first thing people tell you. Like, it's not. They'll either tell you, I never seen it, I saw it, but I don't like it. I only watched a couple seasons, or I'm a fan of it, or whatever the case is. But that's what they'll tell you. But the reality is, um, while that's what they would just tell you, and that's what people just tell you with other forms of entertainment. That is, when it comes to wrestling, one of the first things people always say, as if they're telling you something you don't know, is, yeah, that's just not real, right? Like, it's the reason for that is because of the origins of wrestling. Because wrestling would do a lot of tricks and stuff, to like the whole carnival trick that I told you, to just to kind of prove to people, that give the persona that it's real, make people believe that it's real. And Even, I mean, you can go to the 40s, you can go to the 50s, you can go to the 60s, and it would just still, like, it's there's clips of Stossel getting slapped around because he was trying to tell a wrestler that, come on, this shit ain't real, and then he just started slapping the shit out of him. There was always a crusade to prove that the shit's not real, right? And wrestling did this thing to protect the business for so many decades. Because the fact of the matter is, the more people that thought it was real, the more money they made. All right? It's just, and even the whole, like, even if people didn't think it was real, but like they wanted it to be real, even that was marketable. Like even like, I don't know if it's real. Is it real? It doesn't look real to me. Like, but it's just as long as they kept paying money at the gate, as long as they still watched it on TV, they wanted to keep that kayfabe alive. And like nowadays, everybody uses wrestling terms, right? Everybody knows what the word kayfabe is, right? Everybody knows what putting somebody over means. Everybody knows what the heel and the face is. This is all wrestling terminologies, all right? Last week, I saw so many people all over the internet keep saying, oh, Daenerys Targaryen had a heel turn. Like, that's a wrestling term. And that was an inside wrestling term that was used by promoters, wrestlers, and people in the business for the longest time. Now, every wrestling review you hear, they're talking in wrestling terms. Okay, like it's these kayfabe terms. For so long, wrestling had this kind of fraternity kind of attitude, and everything was about protecting the business, and we can't let the cat out of the bag. Okay, we can't let everybody in on the joke. Like, we had to kind of still give people that reasonable suspicion that maybe there's something real about this. Like, it's always had that like aspect of it. Like, till this day, like Bret Hart gets assaulted in the ring, and people are like, is that a shoot, or was that a work? Like, people are unsure because of it's just the damage of that history. Okay, it's just, there was a time where they were trying to protect the business, and there was ever a time where you could know if it's a shoot or a work. It's now. Like, now they make it obvious now. Not, they're not. There's no reason to. First of all, if you understood why they would work something, is to make money out of it. Like, they're not going to make money out of Bret Hart right now. Okay, but there was an aspect of protecting the business, and those wrestling terminologies were really internal. The outside public didn't understand that they were, quote unquote, being worked. Okay, they weren't in on the whole thing. It's like the babyface heel, the good versus evil story. Wrestling exploited the shit out of that, right? Playing the bad guy and marketing yourself that way. That comes from wrestling. All right. That's where it comes from. Like all the things that even non-wrestling fans that I hear them say about boxers and MMA fighters, like things like, oh, well, that Brazilian fighter should learn to speak English to be more marketable. And, stuff like that, all that mentality, it all comes from wrestling. All of it. The whole, like, oh, he needs to talk more shit at the press conferences. Wrestling. The origins of wrestling started all this, right? Like, wrestling promoters knew a long time ago, like, how to sell shit, right? Like, a long time ago, they knew how to work people, right? Even that term, internal, right? There was nothing like, presenting to people like this evil motherfucker, right? Or this flamboyant dude like a Gorgeous George, or there's nothing like someone like that can bring the masses. Like the whole idea of I want to see that dude get his ass beat, right? Like even people that suspected this shit's not real, but they're like, I don't know if it's real or not, but that dude, I want to like I want his mouth shut. Like that all that comes the origins of it comes from wrestling. All of it. Just last weekend. Just this last weekend, Deontay Wilder says he wants to kill somebody, right? And you have people debating whether he meant what he said or if it was just kayfabe, apparently. It was just trying to sell the fight. Okay. The influence of wrestling throughout so many like decades, the way it protected itself internally, the way it kind of sold its product to people, the tactics that they would use to work the crowd and sell a wrestling match and sell characters. The way they did all these things, it has had a deep influence on everything that we see nowadays, especially in combat sports, right? All that trash talking and the way of trash that Conor McGregor does pro wrestling, right? The whole thing. Mayweather marketing himself as a bad guy, and because it's gonna have people want to see him fucking lose, and they're gonna buy to see. They get suckered. It's true. There's a wrestling dynamic behind that. The way it's promoted. There is. So back to why do people keep trying to remind everybody that wrestling's fake, right? Even though Vince has told people since I think like the early '80s or mid '80s, one or the other, somewhere in the '80s, right? Came out and said, "Yeah, it's sports entertainment." Now he did it because he didn't want to pay the commissions no more, right? And the reality is, about 90% of the public already knew it wasn't real anyway. Like it was like pointless to keep trying to prove to people that shit's real. There was really no reason to do it anymore. So why pay percentages to the commission and all that for what? It makes no sense. Commission didn't care. That's a whole story on its own. Like, what was the commission in on this whole thing when they knew it wasn't real? Like, it's the commission. If anybody knew, it was the commission, but they were getting their cut, right? Plus, even people in the commission knew at any point a real match could be made. Promoter goes up to him and says, "Yeah, this guy doesn't want to put this guy over, so I switched the matchup. He's gonna have to fight the shoot guy now, so it's gonna be a real fight." Just so you know, so a real match, I should say, right? So they're gonna go to the ring and do their thing, all right? Just so you know, all right. He might need some medical attention after the match, right? Cool. That's how it was. That's how it was. To me, the most fascinating stories of wrestling are definitely, and we'll do this in other videos, but like in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, fascinating shit. Fascinating. Because you really see a lot of this. You learn about the double crosses and, the shoot double cross. And like you learn about a lot of these things that you don't really see today, right? Like I don't know, if Seth Rollins doesn't want to put somebody over like that's handled like in a meeting with Vince, like like that's where it's handled. Like they're not gonna throw him in there, like they're not gonna like tell Brock Lesnar, "Hey, go beat him up for real. He doesn't want to play ball." Like they can't really do that anymore, right? But up until the '90s, they could have really done it, right? The best example of a double cross that the most modern one is the Montreal screw job. Now, even that, till this day, there's still people like, "Oh, it was a work." Like people don't know, but I don't believe it was a work. All right, but he was double crossed, right? So even though it was a work and everybody understood it was a work, even Vince himself didn't know what the fuck they were going to do until like the day of, right? And so what was happening, Bret Hart didn't want to put Shawn over. Shawn definitely didn't want to put Bret over. So Vince told Bret it's going to be a draw. It went ended in a draw, right? And and if you look at the documentary Wrestling with Shadows, I mean, they talk about British Bulldog Tom Bret kick out at 1. Don't kick out at 2 when he goes for a pinfall because they could do a fast count. Right, so so he was kicking out earlier than usual, and the reason a lot of people think it's a work is because he let Shawn put him in a sharpshooter, and but I, I just don't think Bret thought like if he puts him in a sharpshooter, right? And just to be specific, a lot of people say, "Well, I didn't see a tap." There was like tapping out did not become a thing until like that all that comes from like Brazilian jiu-jitsu and MMA. And if you go back to wrestling, they wouldn't tap out, folks. Like it was tapping out. They wouldn't tap out submissions. They would verbally supposedly tell the ref, "I give up," right? So I think in ref's mind, if I don't say I give up, then they'll look stupid if they stop the match. But they did. Like Vince called for it, like ring the bell, and but let's say like for whatever reason, let's say if Bret didn't want to do any submissions, I don't know what they were going to do, to be honest with you. I don't. And who do you pick? So anyway, there's a backstory to this that someone, I think it was Jim Cornette, advised Vince, "Hey, look, this dude's leaving the WCW, bro. And if he doesn't want to put Shawn over, then just put him in the ring with Ken Shamrock. And just tell him he's got to put him over. If not, then Ken's going to make him get his fucking shoulders on the mat. Or he's going to make him, give up. He's gonna put him in a submission and make him give up. Right? So that would have been interesting. Right? That would have been very interesting, to be honest with you. I can't visualize shit like this in today's wrestling, honestly. I just can't. Kevin Nash talks about when the Monday Night Wars, like early on when it started, when the NWO attacked some talent in the back, and he darted Rey Mysterio straight, like face first into like not literally, but to like a trailer, and that there was residents around the area calling police, and the police showed up. That wasn't part of the plan for the cops to show up, but he says the visual effect was great. Like it just looked organic. But there was some people saying, even with Scott Hall, like the way they did it, they worked it. He came out and, you know who I am. You just don't know why I'm here. And it just made it look like Vince, had Scott Hall out there to start some shit and intimidate them. It was just brilliantly done. Like, it really was. Like there was some people thinking, is that part of the real? I don't know. Right. So yes, that's why whenever, like, obviously it wasn't real, but the fact that many people were tricked into believing certain aspects of it were real, and that's the reason why you have so many people till this day. It's not real, right? Well, no shit. No shit, Sherlock. I know it's not real. But that's why. That's why they don't do it for other shit, but they do it for wrestling. Because for a long time it was promoted as if it was real. And even after it wasn't, they would still try to do things. Even till this day, Vince's little things that it's obviously a work, but kind of plays with some people's minds, I guess, right? Like when they had Paul Heyman come out and say, that's the last time I remember them doing it, but come out and say he kind of hinted or implied that Brock's not going to play ball. He's not a sports entertainer. Okay, he's a fighter. Okay, and if he does something legit in the match, it's not on Brock. Okay, like just shit like that. Like they still kind of do stuff like that. Once in a while, like he implied that. Well, did Lesnar really put like was Lesnar supposed to win that Undertaker match? Like really, or is that really what you believe? Like it's just shit like that. He was okay. But yeah, just wanted to kind of give this quick video here. I'll do specific stories and like specifics and stuff. Okay, but I just wanted to kind of just do this video really quick. But just wanted to kind of give this quick kind of early origins aspect of it and make people understand the business a little more. Okay, understand where heel came from. Okay, where did working the crowd come from? Like those origins of it. Those the internal talk. It's. I'm telling you. I mean, it's at the end of the day, wrestling has always been about putting butts in seats, selling tickets, and making money. That's what it's been about, right? The toughest dudes knew, yeah, I'm probably the toughest guy here, but I want to make money, right? Shoot fighters had leverage, they did. Like I'll tell you, like Ric Flair was marketable. Ric Flair is not a real fighter, dude. Like, there's, a lot of wrestlers in the business will tell you, yeah, Ric Flair was a pussy. Okay, Ric Flair was the biggest pussy imaginable, right? Like, I don't know if that's true, but it's like whenever people say who was the best fighter, like out of all the wrestlers, nobody said Ric Flair, but he was always a champion, right? Well, because he had the charisma, like he had the, he had a way of gravitating people to the business, and he surrounded himself with tough dudes, like legitimate tough motherfuckers. Okay, and Arn Anderson was a legitimate tough dude. Okay, and Ric Flair didn't go anywhere without one of those tough dudes with him. Okay, because it was simple. If somebody wanted to start shit, the real legitimate tough dude would beat the shit out of that guy, right? And then it's just that old mentality, right? If I beat you up, what do you think the champ would have done to you, right? And that's it. If a wrestler didn't want to play ball with Ric Flair and put him over, okay, they would take care of that dude. Like not Ric Flair himself, but they would take care of him. And but wrestlers understood. Like if you're a legitimate tough dude, all right, like you knew what role you had to play, because guess what, Ric Flair's selling out, arenas. He's putting butts in seats. He's feeding your family too, like in the process, right? You're getting a cut out of that. You're making more money out of that than if he wasn't there. So that's just the way the business was. All right. A lot of this went down as soon as Vince came out and said, all right, it's just not real. Okay. It's sports entertainment. Okay. It's all a show. All right. Fine. Okay. It's all a show, guys. As soon as that was revealed, a lot of these original, the cat started to get out of the bag, right? Like it's just it. But there you go. Anyways, those are my thoughts. 70 Sports TV says, bro, what the fuck happened to Game of Thrones? I'll call you about it later. I don't know what happened with Game of Thrones. So disappointed. Omar 07, I'm Mexican. My family had me watching that old school 1970 Mexican wrestling growing up, like Santo and Blue Damon. Interesting. I watched a lot of Santo movies. I remember that. LKM Karaoke. I didn't know you knew that much about pro wrestling. Now I want to hear more of what you know. Good. All right. So I'm going to be doing a lot of This is not anything specific or anything like that, but I don't even know. Be doing a lot of my origin wrestling videos live. I'll probably be recording those, but we'll see. We'll see. I get lazy, man. I hate editing videos and uploading them. And I just hate that process. But going live is just easier for me. But we'll see. I just wanted to kind of stand out from my wrestling shit. So I'm sorry, from the boxing shit I do. Lastly, I want to end it with this. In the early 1900s, um, a lot of boxing promoters were, or wrestling promoters, and vice versa, did both. Right, like they promoted both events. Both types of entertainment. They would do boxing, and they would do wrestling. Right, they promoted both. There is a distant cousin effect in terms of pro wrestling and pro boxing, right? And if you go all the way back, I'm talking before the London Prize rules and all that. If you go a certain distance back, right, before kayfabe, or even though, and by the way, there is no way to prove, none, that some 1800 shit wasn't kayfabe. If, like, the only reason we know about the kayfabe that was done in early wrestling, because promoters later on came out and admitted it, right? And wrestling itself eventually came out and said, all right, it's all show, as it slowly started getting revealed that it was. The more theatrical it became, the more obvious it became that it was all show, right? Which I want to touch on that in a moment, but there is a distant cousin kind of origin in pro wrestling and pro boxing. And it's funny how they both ended up in two different places. Like, they're unrecognizable, but what is recognizable is a ring, right? That's why they're done in rings. I don't know who started the ring first, to be honest with you. I don't know. If you could argue it was both collectively, right? But then once the wrestling aspect was taken out of boxing, early prize fighting, I should say, then wrestling kind of went its own way, right, altogether, and had to find its own way to be marketable. How do we market this really unappealing form of fighting, wrestling, right, to the masses? It was so unappealing that early prize fighting promoters wanted nothing to do with it. So it started becoming more theatrical, right? Believe it or not, you know, you know, bouncing off ropes and clotheslines were theatrical at some point. Okay. But in terms of wrestling becoming more theatrical and there being a backlash in the wrestling community about it, is nothing new, right? Nothing. Like, when wrestlers were first starting to get on the top turnbuckle and jumping off doing elbow drops, there was some quote unquote old school wrestling promoters and old school wrestlers that really had an issue with that, because it was just like making it obvious that this shit's not real, right? And so they had an issue with that altogether, that it looked ridiculous. Why would somebody just be laying there while you're climbing why would you climb the top? Like, when you think about it, right, there's no reason why somebody would climb all the way to the top rope and pose to the crowd and then do an elbow drop. Like, why not just drop a knee on his ass when you're right there, right? Makes sense. So when people, and even me, I criticize a lot of the spot fest that we see today in wrestling. It's just nothing new, right? It's a lot of the things that we just deemed normal in terms of pro wrestling in the 90s and 80s, and they weren't when they first came out, right? Like, there was nothing, like, there was a lot of criticism of the over theatrical nature of it, mainly because they wanted to protect the business, right? It was like, we got to make it look real, guys, right? And that slowly started to kind of fade away, and there was a fear that if we admit to people that it's not real, then they're just going to watch boxing, right? They're going to watch like another form of entertainment. Nowadays, it's MMA, right? Why would they watch us? And and I'll do a whole nother video on this, but I just don't think that's the case. I think even people that even in the 70s and the 60s, like I honestly believe most people were in on it. Like people knew, like, it's there's no way they couldn't know. Like people knew it was an act, and but they were okay with, um, it's they were okay with, just being in that world. They were okay with that. It's they just were right, and I'm forgetting the term for it, but anyway, it doesn't matter. I made my point. With that said, guys, I'm gonna go ahead and wrap this up. For those who listened later on, you could always go back, listen to this on archive. All right, we'll do some more origin stuff, specific stories, etc., etc. If you want to, you can always search my video about Bruno Sammartino. All right. I did a video about him when he passed away. You can always go ahead and check that out. This is D Style. And guys, I'm out of here. Peace.